long before the pyramids rose above the Egyptian desert, long before Stonehenge stood upon the English plains, long before the first cities filled the valleys of Mesopotamia, there was a lonely hill overlooking the rolling landscape of southeastern Turkey. For thousands of years, it appeared completely ordinary. Covered with grass, scattered stones, and drifting soil, it blended quietly into the surrounding countryside. Shepherds passed by without giving it much thought. Generations walked across its summit unaware that beneath their feet rested one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever made. Hidden beneath that silent hill lay a mystery nearly 12,000 years old, a place so unexpected that when archaeologists finally uncovered it, they struggled to believe what they were seeing. In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt visited the site known today as Göbekli Tepe. At first glance, the landscape seemed unremarkable. Fragments of worked limestone protruded from the earth. Scattered pieces of carved stone hinted that something unusual might lie below. But no one expected the scale of what would soon emerge. As excavations slowly removed layers of soil, enormous stone pillars began appearing one after another. Each stood several meters tall. Some weighed as much as 20 tons. Many were carved with remarkably detailed images of wild animals: foxes, snakes, vultures, boars, lions, and other creatures that had roamed the ancient world thousands of years before the first written language. The discovery astonished archaeologists. According to the traditional understanding of history, monuments of this size should not have existed at such an early date. 12,000 years ago, humanity was still thought to consist primarily of small bands of hunter-gatherers. Agriculture had barely begun. There were no cities, no kings, no organized states, no metal tools, no wheels, no written language. Yet somehow, someone had planned, carved, transported, and raised enormous stone monuments unlike anything previously known from that distant age. Almost immediately, extraordinary questions began to emerge. Who built Göbekli Tepe? Why would hunter-gatherers invest enormous amounts of time and energy constructing such a place? How were stones weighing up to 20 tons cut from solid limestone, transported across the landscape, and carefully erected without modern machinery? What purpose did these massive circles of carved pillars serve? Were they places of ceremony, gathering, memory, or something entirely different? And perhaps the greatest mystery of all, why was the entire site deliberately buried after centuries of use? Rather than being destroyed by war or abandoned to nature, Göbekli Tepe appears to have been intentionally covered beneath thousands of tons of earth. The people who built it seemed determined to hide it from the world. Their reasons remain unknown. Even more remarkable is what this discovery suggests about the origins of civilization itself. For generations, historians believed that agriculture came first. Farming allowed permanent settlements. Settlements grew into villages. Villages developed into cities. Only then, it was thought, could large ceremonial monuments and organized religious practices emerge. Göbekli Tepe challenges that sequence. It raises the possibility that shared beliefs and large communal gatherings may have helped bring people together before farming transformed human society. True. The story of civilization may need to be told in an entirely different order. Throughout this documentary, we will explore Göbekli Tepe using the best evidence available from archaeology, radiocarbon dating, anthropology, and related scientific research. Many aspects of the site are supported by strong physical evidence, while others remain subjects of active debate among researchers. Where the evidence is clear, we will present it. Where uncertainty remains, we will distinguish carefully between established discoveries and competing interpretations. Because despite decades of excavation, Göbekli Tepe still refuses to surrender all of its secrets. The stones remain silent. The builders left no written records. And the questions they left behind continue to challenge everything we thought we knew about humanity's distant past. The discovery beneath this hill would force historians to rethink everything they thought they knew. Long before kingdoms ruled vast empires, long before great cities rose behind towering walls, long before writing preserved human history, the world was a very different place. Nearly 12,000 years ago, humanity stood at the edge of enormous change. The last ice age was slowly coming to an end. For tens of thousands of years, massive sheets of ice had covered large parts of North America, Northern Europe, and Asia. Glaciers stretched across landscapes that today support forests, farms, and bustling cities. But the climate was changing. Temperatures gradually began to rise. The great ice sheets slowly retreated. Rivers swelled with meltwater. Sea levels climbed. Entire landscapes transformed over generations. The changes were slow enough that a single person might hardly notice them during a lifetime. Yet over centuries, the world itself was being reshaped. The animals also changed. Woolly mammoths still wandered parts of the northern hemisphere. Giant deer crossed open grasslands. Wild horses grazed across vast plains. Aurochs, the powerful ancestors of modern cattle, moved in enormous herds. Lions, wolves, bears, and leopards remained formidable predators. Every hunt carried risk. Every journey demanded caution. For the people living through this changing world, survival depended entirely upon understanding nature. These were hunter-gatherers. They did not plant fields. They did not harvest crops. Instead, they followed the rhythms of the land. When herds migrated, they followed. When fruits ripened, they gathered them. When rivers filled with fish, they adapted their movements accordingly. Home was rarely permanent. Families traveled with the seasons. Temporary camps rose and disappeared as food sources changed throughout the year. Life demanded flexibility rather than permanence. Unlike later civilizations, these communities owned very little. Everything had to be carried. Stone blades, wooden spears, bone needles, simple baskets, animal hides for warmth. Every object served a purpose. Anything unnecessary became a burden. Yet despite possessing few material goods, they carried something far more valuable. Knowledge. Knowledge of rivers. Knowledge of seasons. Knowledge of animal behavior. Knowledge passed carefully from one generation to the next. An experienced elder might remember where water could still be found during drought. A skilled hunter recognized fresh tracks invisible to inexperienced eyes. A healer understood which plants eased pain and which could prove deadly. Their survival depended not upon buildings, but upon memory. The world they inhabited contained no farms. Agriculture had not yet transformed human life. No fields stretched across the countryside. No orchards lined riverbanks. No granaries stored harvests for winter. People lived directly from the resources surrounding them. Because food sources constantly changed, permanent settlements remained rare. Without farming, there were no large villages. Without villages, there were no growing towns. Without towns, there were no cities. There were no crowded marketplaces. No towering temples. No palaces overlooking busy streets. No defensive walls protecting thousands of residents. Human populations remained remarkably small compared to those of later civilizations. Most communities probably consisted of only a few dozen individuals, perhaps 20, perhaps 40, sometimes fewer. These small bands often knew every member personally. Cooperation was essential. Conflict could threaten everyone's survival. There were no kings ruling vast territories, no emperors commanding armies, no governments collecting taxes, no written laws. Leadership, where it existed, was likely based more upon experience, skill, or respect than permanent political authority. A successful hunter might guide a dangerous expedition. An elder might settle disagreements. Someone with deep knowledge of plants could care for the sick. Responsibilities may have shifted depending upon the situation rather than belonging permanently to a single ruler. Their technology also reflected this simpler way of life. Stone remained humanity's most important material. Flint, obsidian, quartzite, other hard rocks carefully shaped into razor-sharp blades. Hand axes, scrapers, projectile points. These tools required remarkable craftsmanship. Although primitive by modern standards, they represented generations of accumulated knowledge. A well-crafted stone blade could determine whether a family found enough food to survive another winter. Wood complemented stone. Spears extended the hunter's reach. Digging sticks uncovered edible roots. Simple wooden handles transformed sharp flakes into more effective cutting tools. Bone and antler provided needles, fishhooks, awls, and decorative objects. Every available material found a purpose. Looking back from today's world of towering skyscrapers and advanced technology, it is tempting to imagine these communities as simple. But archaeology paints a far more complex picture. Hunter-gatherers successfully adapted to deserts, forests, mountains, coastlines, and frozen landscapes. They navigated enormous territories without maps. They possessed detailed ecological knowledge developed over countless generations. They cooperated closely. They cared for children. They buried the dead. They created art. Their lives were demanding, but far from primitive in thought. For much of the 20th century, archaeologists believed human history followed a fairly straightforward path. First came agriculture. Once people learned to cultivate crops and domesticate animals, they could remain in one place. Permanent settlements appeared. Small villages gradually expanded. As populations increased, societies became more organized. Specialized labor developed. Leaders emerged. Large ceremonial buildings were constructed. Eventually, organized religion flourished alongside growing civilizations. The sequence seemed logical. Agriculture led to villages. Villages led to cities. Cities gave rise to temples and organized belief. For decades, this explanation shaped our understanding of how civilization began. It appeared supported by discoveries across Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China, and many other regions. The pattern seemed almost universal. First farming, then civilization, then monumental architecture. It was a story repeated in textbooks around the world. It made sense, until one extraordinary discovery challenged nearly every step of that familiar sequence. Then archaeologists found something that didn't fit. Long before archaeologists gave it a name. Long before history books celebrated its importance. Long before the world realized what lay beneath its surface. It was simply a hill. Rising gently above the rolling plains of southeastern Turkey, the mound blended naturally into the surrounding landscape. Covered with grass, loose stones, and centuries of wind-blown soil, there was little to suggest that anything extraordinary rested below. For thousands of years, shepherds led their flocks across its slopes. Travelers passed nearby without stopping. Generations came and went. The hill remained silent. Its greatest secret waited patiently beneath the earth. Today we know this remarkable place as Göbekli Tepe. Its name comes from the Turkish language and means potbelly hill, a simple description for what appeared to be an ordinary rise in the landscape. Yet appearances can be deceiving. Located in southeastern Turkey near the modern city of Sanliurfa, Göbekli Tepe sits atop one of the highest points in the surrounding region. From its summit, ancient people could observe the valley stretching into the distance, watching the movement of animals, changing weather, and the endless rhythms of the natural world. Its elevated position may not have been chosen by accident. Exactly why this location became so important remains uncertain, but its commanding view would have been difficult to ignore. Although local farmers had occasionally found carved stones on the hill, no one fully understood their significance. In the 1960s, archaeologists briefly surveyed the area. They recorded scattered limestone fragments and unusual stone features. However, they believed the site belonged to a relatively ordinary medieval cemetery. No major excavation followed. The hill kept its secret for several more decades. Everything changed in 1994. That year, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt visited the site while searching for prehistoric settlements in southeastern Turkey. Almost immediately he noticed something unusual. Large pieces of carefully worked limestone lay scattered across the ground. Some showed unmistakable signs of deliberate carving. These were not ordinary rocks shaped by nature. Human hands had created them. Schmidt quickly realized that the hill deserved much closer investigation. Excavations began soon afterward. As archaeologists carefully removed layers of soil using brushes, trowels, and delicate excavation tools, enormous stone pillars slowly emerged from beneath the earth. At first, only their upper edges appeared. Then more became visible. And then even more. What had seemed like isolated stones turned out to be part of vast circular structures hidden underground for thousands of years. The deeper researchers excavated, the more astonishing the discovery became. Many of the pillars stood over 5 meters tall. Some weighed between 10 and 20 tons. Each had been carved from solid limestone with remarkable precision. Most shared a distinctive T-shaped design unlike anything previously known from such an early period. The surfaces of many pillars displayed beautifully carved reliefs of wild animals. Foxes, boars, snakes, vultures, scorpions, lions, wild cattle, birds. The carvings were not rough or accidental. They showed careful planning, impressive craftsmanship, and extraordinary artistic skill. Some pillars even featured carved human arms, hands, and belts, leading many researchers to suggest that the great stone monuments may represent highly stylized human figures. Exactly whom, or what, they represented remains one of the site's enduring mysteries. Another remarkable discovery lay only a short distance away. Archaeologists identified an ancient limestone quarry where many of the pillars had been cut directly from the bedrock. Several unfinished pillars still remained attached to the stone, frozen forever in the middle of their construction. These abandoned monuments offered an extraordinary glimpse into the building process itself. The builders had first outlined each pillar within the limestone using stone tools. They then carefully removed the surrounding rock until the enormous blocks could be separated from the bedrock. Only after that enormous effort could the stones be transported uphill to the ceremonial enclosures. How this transportation occurred remains one of Gobekli Tepe's greatest engineering mysteries. No wheels existed. No metal tools. No draft animals such as oxen had yet been domesticated. Yet somehow, people moved blocks weighing up to 20 tons across uneven ground using only the technology available at the end of the Stone Age. Researchers believe hundreds of individuals may have worked together using ropes, wooden sledges, rollers, and carefully coordinated teamwork. Exactly how they achieved this remains actively studied. The scale of the entire complex is equally astonishing. So far, archaeologists have uncovered multiple large circular and oval stone enclosures. Ground-penetrating surveys suggest that many more structures remain buried beneath the hill, waiting to be excavated. Only a small percentage of Gobekli Tepe has been explored. Most of its secrets still lie hidden underground. One reason scientists are confident about the site's incredible age comes from radiocarbon dating. Organic materials recovered during excavation, such as charcoal and animal remains associated with the earliest construction phases, have consistently dated the monument to roughly 9,600 BCE. That places Gobekli Tepe at nearly 12,000 years old. Thousands of years older than Stonehenge. Thousands of years older than the Egyptian pyramids. Older than the earliest known cities. Older than writing. Older than pottery. The dating has been independently confirmed through multiple scientific studies, making its antiquity one of the strongest established facts about the site. It was this extraordinary age that stunned the archaeological world. Before Gobekli Tepe, few researchers imagined that hunter-gatherers could organize labor on such a monumental scale. Massive ceremonial architecture was supposed to belong to later farming societies with permanent settlements, large populations, and organized governments. Yet here stood undeniable evidence that enormous monuments had been built long before any of those developments were thought possible. The discovery challenged decades of accepted history. It suggested that humanity's story might be far more complicated than anyone had imagined. For archaeologists around the world, Gobekli Tepe was not simply another excavation. It was a discovery capable of rewriting one of civilization's oldest chapters. Nothing this old should have existed. Long before kings commanded vast armies. Long before architects drew careful plans. Long before engineers calculated the weight of stone. Someone built Gobekli Tepe. Nearly 12,000 years ago, hundreds of massive limestone pillars were quarried, carved, transported, and raised into carefully planned circles. The achievement is undeniable. The builders, however, remain almost completely unknown. Unlike the civilizations of Egypt or Mesopotamia, the people of Gobekli Tepe left no written records. No names survive. No royal inscriptions celebrate their accomplishments. No statues identify their leaders. The stones remain, but their builders have vanished into history. Archaeologists know one thing with remarkable confidence. These people were almost certainly hunter-gatherers. Radiocarbon dating places the earliest construction long before agriculture became widespread across the region. There is no clear evidence that the builders cultivated fields of wheat or barley on a large scale. Instead, they likely survived by hunting wild gazelle, wild cattle, boar, and other animals while gathering edible plants growing naturally across the landscape. This alone surprised researchers. For generations, historians believed only farming societies possessed enough food and stability to organize large construction projects. Yet Gobekli Tepe appears to tell a different story. Even more remarkable is what these builders did not possess. They had no metal. Copper tools would not appear for thousands of years. Iron remained unimaginably far in the future. Every pillar was shaped using carefully crafted stone tools. Flint chisels, hammerstones, stone picks, simple technologies, used with extraordinary skill. They also had no wheels. The wheel, one of humanity's greatest inventions, would not appear until several millennia later. No wagons carried the massive pillars. No carts rolled across prepared roads. Everything had to be moved by human effort alone. Nor did they possess pottery. Clay vessels had not yet become common in this region. Food was stored using baskets, skins, wooden containers, or other organic materials that rarely survive in the archaeological record. The familiar image of settled farming villages filled with ceramic jars simply does not fit the earliest phases of Göbekli Tepe. Most surprising of all, they were probably not full-time farmers. The traditional model suggested farming came first, monumental construction later. Göbekli Tepe reverses that expectation. Its builders seem to have gathered before agriculture transformed daily life. This raises one extraordinary question. How did hunter-gatherers organize such an enormous project? The stone circles did not appear overnight. Each pillar required careful planning. Workers first identified suitable limestone within nearby bedrock. Archaeologists have discovered ancient quarries only a short distance from the site, where unfinished pillars remain attached to the rock exactly as they were left thousands of years ago. These abandoned monuments provide valuable evidence of the construction process. Builders carved deep channels around each pillar using stone tools. Only after removing the surrounding limestone could the enormous block finally be separated from the bedrock. Then came the greatest challenge: transportation. Some pillars weigh as much as 20 tons. Without wheels, without metal, without domesticated draft animals. Moving such enormous stones required remarkable cooperation. Researchers believe ropes made from plant fibers, wooden sledges, timber rollers, and sheer human strength may have been used. Dozens, perhaps even hundreds, of people may have worked together to pull each pillar across the landscape. Exactly how they accomplished this remains uncertain. Experiments using traditional technology suggest that coordinated teamwork alone can move surprisingly large stones. Yet many practical questions remain unanswered. Who directed the work? Someone almost certainly coordinated each stage of construction. Groups needed to know where stones belonged. Workers had to pull together at the same moment. Excavated foundations required careful preparation before pillars could be raised upright. Such organization suggests planning. Planning suggests leadership. But leadership does not necessarily mean kings. Many anthropologists believe small hunter-gatherer societies often relied upon respected individuals rather than permanent rulers. Experienced hunters, skilled organizers, elders, ritual specialists. Different people may have led different tasks depending upon their knowledge and abilities. Gobekli Tepe may have operated in a similar way. Still, this remains an interpretation rather than direct evidence. Another mystery concerns the workforce itself. Did the same people live here throughout the year? Or did different groups gather only during certain seasons? Some researchers favor the idea of seasonal gatherings. Perhaps neighboring hunter-gatherer bands traveled to Gobekli Tepe during times when food was abundant. Large communal hunts may have provided enough resources to support hundreds of workers for limited periods. Construction could then continue until groups dispersed once again. Others argue that at least a small community may have remained near the site year-round, maintaining the enclosures while preparing for larger seasonal gatherings. At present, the archaeological evidence does not provide a definitive answer. Both possibilities continue to be actively discussed. Stone tools recovered during excavation help reveal daily activity. Thousands of flint blades, hammerstones, chisels, and working tools have been discovered across the site. Some researchers favor the idea of seasonal gatherings. Perhaps neighboring hunter-gatherer bands traveled to Gobekli Tepe during times when food was abundant. Large communal hunts may have provided enough resources to support hundreds of workers for limited periods. Construction could then continue until groups dispersed once again. Others argue that at least a small community may have remained near the site year-round, maintaining the enclosures while preparing for larger seasonal gatherings. At present, the archaeological evidence does not provide a definitive answer. Both possibilities continue to be actively discussed. Stone tools recovered during excavation help reveal daily activity. Thousands of flint blades, hammerstones, chisels, and working tools have been discovered across the site, where patterns show that many were used for cutting limestone and processing materials associated with construction. Together with the nearby quarries, these discoveries confirm that the monuments were built using surprisingly simple technology applied with remarkable precision. The achievement becomes even more extraordinary when viewed through the eyes of the modern world. No blueprints, no cranes, no steel, no engines, only stone, wood, rope, planning, and cooperation. The true identity of these builders may never be known. We do not know what they called themselves. We do not know what language they spoke. We do not know what songs they sang while hauling stone beneath the Anatolian sun. We know only what they left behind. Great circles of carved limestone, masterful craftsmanship, evidence of astonishing teamwork, and questions that continue to challenge archaeologists today. The builders remain almost completely anonymous. Long before written language preserved human ideas, long before myths filled sacred books, long before civilizations carved the stories of kings into stone, the people of Gobekli Tepe were already carving something extraordinary. Towering above the ancient hill stood enormous limestone pillars unlike anything the world had ever seen. Some reached more than 5 meters in height. Others weighed as much as 20 tons. Even after nearly 12,000 years, they still dominate the landscape, silent, motionless, watching. Their distinctive shape immediately captures attention. Rather than simple rectangular columns, nearly every major pillar resembles a giant stone letter T. This unusual design appears again and again throughout the site. Dozens of these monumental pillars stand arranged in carefully planned circles and enclosures. Their remarkable consistency suggests they followed a shared architectural tradition rather than random construction. But why were they shaped this way? No written explanation survives. No ancient builder left instructions. Yet archaeologists have noticed something remarkable. Several of the largest pillars include carved human features. Long arms stretch down the sides. Hands rest across the front. Some display carefully carved belts and loincloths. These details have led many researchers to suggest that the pillars may represent highly stylized human figures. Not realistic statues, but symbolic beings carved into stone. Exactly whom they represent remains unknown. Ancestors? Important leaders? Powerful spirits? Deities? Or something entirely different? The evidence confirms the carvings exist. The meaning behind them remains interpretation. The pillars themselves are only part of the mystery. Their surfaces are covered with an astonishing collection of animals. Some appear almost ready to leap from the stone. Others seem to crawl silently across its surface. Each carving displays remarkable artistic skill despite being created with simple stone tools. One of the animals appearing most frequently is the fox. Long-bodied and alert, foxes appear on several pillars throughout Gobekli Tepe. In today's world, foxes are often associated with intelligence, caution, or adaptability. Whether ancient people viewed them similarly remains impossible to know. The carvings clearly demonstrate that foxes were important enough to appear repeatedly. What remains uncertain. Snakes also dominate many of the carvings. Some slither vertically. Others twist across the stone in groups. Their bodies overlap in complex patterns that immediately attract attention. Snakes have held symbolic importance in many later cultures around the world. They have represented danger, renewal, death, rebirth, and protection. Yet archaeologists urge caution. We cannot assume meanings from civilizations separated by thousands of years. Gobekli Tepe belonged to a completely different world. The snakes may have held entirely different significance. Or perhaps they simply reflected animals commonly encountered in daily life. Birds appear throughout the site as well. Some resemble cranes. Others may represent waterfowl. But perhaps the most striking are the vultures. Several carvings show these great birds with wings spread wide. In one famous relief, vultures appear alongside human imagery that has inspired decades of debate. Later cultures sometimes associated vultures with death or the journey of the soul. Whether that interpretation applies here remains unknown. The evidence shows what was carved, not why it was carved. Wild boars also appear frequently. Powerful and dangerous, wild boars were among the most formidable animals hunted by prehistoric communities. Their carved forms display muscular bodies and sharp tusks. Perhaps they represented successful hunts. Perhaps strength. Perhaps danger itself. Or perhaps nothing symbolic at all. The stones refuse to answer. Lions also emerge from the limestone. Although lions no longer roam this region today, Asiatic lions once lived across much of the ancient Near East. To prehistoric hunter-gatherers, encountering such predators would have been both terrifying and unforgettable. Their inclusion demonstrates that the artists carefully observed the powerful wildlife surrounding them: scorpions, wild cattle, gazelles, insects, reptiles. Many different creatures appear throughout the site. Together they create an extraordinary stone menagerie unlike anything found elsewhere from this early period. One question naturally follows: why carve animals instead of people? Some researchers suggest these images may have carried symbolic meaning connected to belief, identity, or storytelling. Perhaps each animal represented a clan. Perhaps certain creatures held spiritual importance. Perhaps the carvings preserved myths passed from one generation to another. Others argue the images may simply reflect the surrounding environment. Hunter-gatherers depended upon these animals for survival. Some provided food. Others represented danger. The carvings may have celebrated the natural world rather than supernatural ideas. Both possibilities remain actively discussed. This distinction highlights one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Evidence and interpretation are not the same. The carvings themselves are undeniable evidence. Anyone visiting Gobekli Tepe can see them. Their age has been confirmed through careful excavation and radiocarbon dating. But assigning meaning is far more difficult. No written explanation survives. No ancient artist left behind a guide describing each image. Modern researchers must compare archaeological evidence with anthropology, ethnography, and studies of later symbolic traditions. These comparisons can suggest possibilities. They cannot provide certainty. As new discoveries continue, interpretations sometimes change. A carving once believed to represent one animal may later be identified as another. New excavations reveal additional details. Fresh technologies uncover previously invisible markings. Science grows because evidence continues to grow. Perhaps future discoveries beneath the unexcavated portions of Gobekli Tepe will reveal entirely new clues. Perhaps they will deepen the mystery even further. For now, the towering pillars remain silent witnesses to a forgotten world. They preserve extraordinary craftsmanship. They preserve remarkable imagination. And they preserve questions that still challenge modern archaeology. The stones speak, but not in a language we yet understand. Long before priests recorded sacred laws. Long before temples echoed with formal prayers. Long before organized religion spread across civilizations. People were already gathering together. At the heart of Gobekli Tepe stand great circles of towering stone pillars. Their careful arrangement immediately raises an important question. What happened here? The builders invested enormous time, energy, and cooperation into creating this remarkable place. Yet archaeologists have found no evidence that people lived permanently inside the great stone enclosures. There are no ordinary houses, no family kitchens, no streets lined with homes. Gobekli Tepe appears to have served a purpose very different from an everyday settlement. If people did not live here, why did they come? One possibility is ritual. Throughout human history, rituals have brought communities together. Some mark the changing seasons. Others celebrate successful harvests. Some honor births. Others remember the dead. Many rituals strengthen cooperation by allowing entire communities to share meaningful experiences. Exactly what rituals may have taken place at Gobekli Tepe remains unknown, but the site's unusual architecture suggests these gatherings were likely important. The great circular enclosures seem carefully designed to focus attention toward the enormous central pillars. Visitors entering these spaces would have been surrounded by towering stone monuments covered with carved animals unlike anything found in ordinary campsites. Such carefully planned spaces often encourage researchers to consider ceremonial activity. Yet ceremony does not necessarily mean religion. That distinction is important. Another fascinating possibility involves communal feasting. Excavations have uncovered enormous quantities of animal bones scattered across the site. Many belong to wild gazelle, wild cattle, boar, deer, and other animals hunted in the surrounding landscape. These discoveries suggest that large groups of people gathered here and shared substantial meals. Preparing such quantities of food would have required cooperation on a remarkable scale. Some archaeologists believe communal feasts may have strengthened social bonds between neighboring hunter-gatherer groups. Food has always brought people together. Sharing a meal creates trust. It builds friendships. It reinforces cooperation. Perhaps these gatherings celebrated successful hunts. Perhaps seasonal migrations. perhaps events now forever lost to history. Exactly why these feasts occurred remains uncertain. Some researchers have proposed another intriguing idea: ancestor worship. Across many later societies, ancestors occupied an important place within community life. Families honored those who came before them. Memories passed from one generation to the next. Important gathering places sometimes became closely connected with the past. Could Gobekli Tepe have served a similar purpose? Some carvings, particularly the famous vultures and human imagery, have inspired such interpretations. Yet no direct evidence confirms ancestor worship at the site. No written records survive. No inscriptions explain the builders' beliefs. The idea remains possible, but unproven. Another theory involves shamanism. In many traditional societies documented by anthropologists, shamans act as ritual specialists. They perform ceremonies, interpret dreams, guide healing practices, lead important community gatherings. Some scholars wonder whether individuals like these may have existed among the people of Gobekli Tepe. Perhaps certain members of society guided ceremonies held within the great stone circles. Perhaps stories, songs, or symbolic performances took place beneath the towering pillars. But once again, archaeology cannot confirm this directly. There is no physical evidence identifying shamans at Gobekli Tepe. It remains one interpretation among several possibilities. Beyond ritual or belief, the site may simply have functioned as an enormous social gathering place. Hunter-gatherer groups often lived in small communities scattered across large landscapes. Most of the year, families may have remained separated while following migrating animals and seasonal food sources. At certain times, they may have reunited, friendships renewed, marriage partners found, knowledge exchanged, children introduced to distant relatives, stone tools traded, stories shared beside great communal fires. Gobekli Tepe may have served as the perfect location for such seasonal gatherings. Its monumental architecture could have strengthened a shared identity among many different groups. Some archaeologists have even suggested that these repeated gatherings encouraged greater cooperation, eventually helping communities transition toward more settled ways of life. True, the monument itself may have helped shape the birth of civilization rather than simply reflecting it. This idea has become one of the most discussed aspects of Gobekli Tepe. Was it truly a temple? Many people describe it that way. The word temple immediately suggests a sacred building dedicated to religious worship. However, archaeologists often use the term cautiously. The physical evidence clearly demonstrates that Gobekli Tepe was an extraordinary ceremonial place. But there is no direct proof that it functioned like the organized temples of later civilizations. No altars have been identified with certainty. No sacred texts survive. No images clearly depict gods. No inscriptions describe prayers or formal religious ceremonies. Calling Gobekli Tepe the world's first temple is therefore an interpretation, not an established fact. Others prefer different descriptions. Perhaps it was a ceremonial gathering place. Perhaps a regional meeting center. Perhaps a monument built to strengthen cooperation between scattered hunter-gatherer communities. Each explanation fits some of the available evidence. None answers every question. This is one of the remarkable strengths of archaeology. Scientists distinguish between what evidence proves and what evidence merely suggests. Gobekli Tepe unquestionably hosted large gatherings. Its builders invested extraordinary effort into creating monumental architecture. People shared food here. They carved powerful symbols into stone. They returned again and again across generations. Beyond these observations, certainty becomes more difficult. And that uncertainty reminds us how much of humanity's earliest history remains hidden beneath time itself. Perhaps the people who gathered beneath these towering pillars never thought of themselves as founding religion. Perhaps they were simply creating traditions that strengthened their communities. Perhaps meaning existed before belief acquired names. Perhaps ceremony existed before doctrine. Perhaps shared experience came before sacred law. Meaning came long before certainty. Long after the final stone had been raised. Long after countless gatherings beneath the towering pillars. Long after generations had walked among the carved monuments. Something extraordinary happened. Gobekli Tepe disappeared. Not beneath the force of an earthquake. Not through invasion. Not by fire. Not by gradual abandonment alone. Instead, someone buried it. This is perhaps the most astonishing mystery of the entire site. When archaeologists first excavated Gobekli Tepe, they expected centuries of wind, rain, and erosion to have slowly covered the ancient structures. Instead, they found something very different. The great stone circles had been deliberately filled. Thousands upon thousands of tons of soil, broken limestone, animal bones, stone tools, and other debris had been carefully placed inside the enclosures. The pillars did not simply collapse beneath drifting earth. They were intentionally buried, layer by layer, stone by stone, until the entire monument vanished beneath the hill. This discovery immediately raised one enormous question. What? Unlike many ancient monuments, Gobekli Tepe shows remarkably little evidence of violent destruction. There are no widespread burn layers suggesting catastrophic fire. No clear signs of invading armies smashing the pillars. No evidence of warfare leaving the monument in ruins. Instead, the structures appear to have been covered with surprising care. Many of the towering T-shaped pillars remain standing exactly where they had originally been erected. The carved animals were preserved beneath the protective soil. Rather than destroying their monument, its builders, or perhaps their descendants, seemed determined to hide it. The burial itself required an astonishing amount of labor. Modern archaeologists estimate that thousands of tons of material were used to fill the great stone circles. This was not the work of a single afternoon, nor even a single season. Large numbers of people must have participated. The same remarkable cooperation that built Gobekli Tepe may also have been responsible for burying it. Whatever their reason, it mattered enough to justify an enormous effort. One possible explanation is protection. Perhaps the people believed the monument had fulfilled its purpose. Rather than abandoning it to weather and erosion, they deliberately sealed it beneath the earth as an act of preservation. Many later civilizations carefully protected sacred places after their use had ended. Could Gobekli Tepe represent one of humanity's earliest examples of this tradition? It is an intriguing possibility, but no direct evidence confirms it. Another theory suggests changing beliefs. Human societies constantly evolve. Traditions change. Ceremonies change. New generations often develop different customs from those of their ancestors. Perhaps the people who returned to Gobekli Tepe centuries after its construction no longer practiced the same rituals. Instead of destroying the old monument, they respectfully buried it before moving on to new traditions. This happened. The burial itself may have carried symbolic meaning. Yet once again, this remains interpretation rather than proven fact. Some archaeologists propose a simpler explanation: abandonment. As agriculture gradually spread across the Fertile Crescent, communities began settling permanently in nearby valleys. Daily life changed. People spent increasing amounts of time cultivating crops, tending animals, and building villages. Large seasonal gathering places like Gobekli Tepe may slowly have become less important. Instead of maintaining the enormous stone circles, later communities may simply have chosen to close them forever. But even this idea leaves an important question unanswered. Why bury the site so carefully instead of simply walking away? Natural environmental changes have also been considered. Around the end of the Ice Age, climates shifted dramatically. Rainfall patterns changed. Plants and animals adapted. Human populations reorganized in response to new conditions. Perhaps changing landscapes influenced how people used the monument. Perhaps nearby settlements relocated. Perhaps hunting routes shifted. These environmental changes almost certainly affected the people living in the region. Whether they directly caused the burial of Gobekli Tepe remains unknown. Some researchers have suggested that different enclosures were buried at different times rather than all at once. True. The burial may have been part of a long-term tradition repeated over many generations. One ceremonial space was completed, filled. Then another was constructed nearby. And later, it too was carefully covered. This gradual process would suggest that burial itself formed part of the site's cultural life. Excavations continue to investigate this possibility. Yet despite decades of research, no single explanation fully accounts for the evidence. Protection, changing beliefs, social transformation, environmental change, intentional closure. Each theory explains part of the mystery. None explains all of it. This is why Gobekli Tepe continues to fascinate archaeologists around the world. The physical evidence is remarkably clear. The monument was deliberately buried. The fill material was placed intentionally. The pillars were preserved beneath thousands of tons of earth. Beyond these facts, certainty begins to fade. The builders left no written records. No final message. No explanation carved into stone. Only silence. Ironically, that silence may be the reason Gobekli Tepe survived at all. Had the monument remained exposed for 12,000 years, weather, erosion, earthquakes, and human activity might have destroyed much of what we see today. Instead, The earth became its guardian. The hill concealed one of humanity's greatest achievements until modern archaeology uncovered it once again. Perhaps the people who buried Göbekli Tepe believed they were ending a chapter. Instead, they preserved it for the future. And after 12,000 years, their greatest secret continues to challenge everything we thought we knew. Perhaps its greatest mystery is not why it was built, but why it disappeared. For decades, the story of civilization seemed settled. Children learned it in classrooms. Universities taught it. History books repeated it across the world. First came agriculture. People learned to grow crops. Permanent villages appeared. Populations expanded. Leaders emerged. Religious monuments followed. It seemed like a logical chain of events. Food first. Civilization second. Religion third. For much of the 20th century, few archaeologists questioned that sequence. Then Göbekli Tepe was uncovered. And suddenly, one of history's oldest stories no longer seemed complete. Radiocarbon dating showed that the monument had been built around 9,600 BCE. At that time, large-scale farming had not yet become established across the region. Its builders were still primarily hunter-gatherers. Yet they had organized one of the most ambitious construction projects ever discovered from that distant age. The implications were enormous. If hunter-gatherers could build monuments of this scale, perhaps agriculture was not the beginning of complex society after all. Instead, something else may have brought people together first. One possibility immediately captured the attention of archaeologists around the world. What if shared beliefs, rituals, or ceremonial gatherings encouraged people to cooperate long before farming transformed human life? Rather than religion appearing after agriculture, perhaps communal ceremonies helped create the conditions that eventually encouraged agriculture itself. This idea became one of the most fascinating debates in modern archaeology. It is important to remember, this remains a scientific hypothesis. Göbekli Tepe clearly demonstrates that monumental architecture existed before widespread farming. That much is supported by strong archaeological evidence. But whether religious gatherings directly inspired agriculture remains uncertain. Many researchers consider the idea plausible. Others argue that climate change, population growth, and environmental pressures played equally important roles. The evidence continues to grow, but the debate continues as well. Regardless of which explanation proves most accurate, Göbekli Tepe revealed something undeniably important. Hunter-gatherers were capable of extraordinary cooperation. For generations, they had often been imagined as small wandering groups focused only on daily survival. Göbekli Tepe paints a far more complex picture. Its builders organized massive labor forces, quarried enormous stones, transported pillars weighing up to 20 tons, created carefully planned ceremonial spaces, and returned to them across many generations. Such achievements required planning, communication, shared purpose, and remarkable social organization. The monument demonstrated that cooperation on a monumental scale existed thousands of years before cities or kingdoms appeared. That realization changed how archaeologists viewed prehistoric societies. Hunter-gatherers were no longer seen simply as isolated bands struggling to survive. They emerged instead as creative communities capable of organizing ambitious projects that reshaped entire landscapes. The discovery also encouraged researchers to search beyond Göbekli Tepe itself. If one extraordinary monument had remained hidden beneath a quiet hill for 12,000 years, could others still be waiting? The answer, it seems, is yes. Only a few dozen kilometers away lies another remarkable site known as Karahan Tepe. Like Göbekli Tepe, it contains massive T-shaped pillars, large ceremonial structures, carefully carved stone architecture, and evidence of communities living during the same extraordinary period of human history. Excavations are still ongoing. Each new season reveals additional buildings and sculptures unlike anything previously known. Karahan Tepe suggests that Göbekli Tepe was not an isolated miracle. Instead, it may have belonged to a much larger network of monumental centers spread across southeastern Anatolia. Another important site is Navali Quarry. Although much of it now lies beneath the waters of a modern dam, archaeologists excavated significant portions before flooding occurred. The site revealed rectangular buildings, limestone sculptures, and T-shaped pillars remarkably similar to those later discovered at Göbekli Tepe. Navali Quarry dates to the early Neolithic period and provides another valuable piece of the puzzle connecting architecture, ritual, and the earliest farming communities. Together, Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, Navali Quarry, and several nearby sites are transforming our understanding of the ancient world. rather than representing one isolated monument. They appear to belong to a broader cultural landscape where communities shared ideas, architectural traditions, and perhaps even ceremonial practices. Each new excavation adds another chapter to a story that scientists are only beginning to understand. Modern archaeology continues uncovering new evidence every year. Advanced technology such as ground-penetrating radar, three-dimensional scanning, drone mapping, microscopic analysis, and improved dating techniques are revealing details that earlier generations could never have imagined. Perhaps many more monuments still lie hidden beneath the hills of Anatolia. Perhaps future discoveries will answer questions that Göbekli Tepe has left unresolved. Or perhaps they will deepen the mystery even further. That is the nature of scientific discovery. Every answer often creates new questions. Göbekli Tepe did not solve the mystery of civilization's origins. Instead, it transformed the questions archaeologists now ask. It reminded the world that history is never truly finished. New discoveries can overturn long-accepted ideas. Old assumptions can disappear beneath fresh evidence. And a quiet hill, ignored for thousands of years, can completely change humanity's understanding of its own past. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Göbekli Tepe is one of humility. No matter how complete our history books may seem, the earth still holds countless stories waiting to be uncovered. And somewhere beneath its surface, the next discovery may already be waiting to rewrite history once again. History itself had to be rewritten.
Our journey began with an ordinary hill, a quiet rise overlooking the plains of southeastern Turkey. For thousands of years, few people imagined that beneath its surface rested one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever made. Today, Göbekli Tepe stands as one of humanity's most remarkable windows into the distant past. Nearly 12,000 years old, it predates Stonehenge by thousands of years. It is older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than the first cities of Mesopotamia, older than writing, older than pottery, older than nearly every monument that once seemed to mark the beginning of civilization. Its discovery forced archaeologists to ask entirely new questions. For generations, the story appeared simple. People invented farming. Permanent villages emerged. Populations grew. Civilizations developed. Only then, large temples and organized ceremonial centers became possible. Göbekli Tepe challenged that familiar sequence. Its builders were almost certainly hunter-gatherers. They had not yet developed fully established agriculture. There were no cities, no kings, no empires, no written language, no metal tools. Yet somehow, they planned, organized, carved, transported, and erected limestone pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Such cooperation required remarkable planning. Hundreds of people may have worked together over many years. Each pillar had to be quarried from solid limestone, shaped with astonishing precision, moved across uneven ground, raised into carefully designed stone enclosures. The effort represents one of the greatest engineering achievements of the prehistoric world. The carvings remain equally extraordinary. Foxes, boars, snakes, vultures, scorpions, wild cattle, lions, birds. Each animal was carved with remarkable skill despite the absence of metal tools. Some pillars even appear to represent stylized human figures, complete with carved arms, hands, and belts. Their exact meaning remains uncertain, but they demonstrate that symbolic thought and artistic ability had already reached an impressive level long before recorded history. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what was built, but what happened afterward. Rather than leaving the monument to decay naturally, its builders appear to have buried it intentionally. Thousands of tons of earth gradually covered the stone circles. The pillars disappeared beneath the landscape. The site remained hidden for nearly 12 millennia. No written explanation survives. No inscription records the decision. The stones remain silent. Even after decades of excavation, many questions remain unanswered. Science, however, has revealed an extraordinary amount. Radiocarbon dating consistently places the earliest construction around 9600 BCE. Excavations have uncovered multiple stone enclosures. Ancient limestone quarries show where many of the pillars originated. Ground-penetrating surveys suggest that much of the site still lies buried beneath the hill. Every excavation season adds another piece to the puzzle. Archaeology has also shown that the builders possessed remarkable technical skill. They understood stone. They organized large groups. They planned complex construction projects. They shared knowledge across generations. These discoveries are supported by physical evidence preserved beneath the earth. Yet many mysteries remain beyond the reach of archaeology. What exactly was Gobekli Tepe built for? Was it primarily ceremonial? Did it serve as a gathering place for neighboring communities? Was it connected to seasonal events? Ancestor remembrance? Shared beliefs? Or something entirely different that modern minds have yet to imagine? No one knows with certainty. We also know nothing about the language spoken by its builders. No written records survive. No names have been preserved. No myths accompany the monuments. The voices of the people who raised these stones disappeared thousands of years before writing was ever invented. Their conversations, their songs, their stories, have all been lost to time. And then there is perhaps the greatest mystery of all. Why was the entire complex deliberately buried? Protection? A changing belief system? A symbolic ending? Or a reason we cannot yet understand? The archaeological evidence confirms that the burial happened. Its purpose remains one of history's great unanswered questions. This uncertainty is not a weakness of science. It is one of its greatest strengths. Archaeologists distinguish carefully between evidence and interpretation. Where discoveries are supported by excavation, dating, and physical remains, they speak with confidence. Where evidence is incomplete, they acknowledge uncertainty. Every new excavation, every improved dating technique, every unexpected discovery, has the potential to reshape our understanding once again. Gobekli Tepe reminds us that history is rarely as simple as we imagine. The deeper we dig into humanity's past, the more surprises emerge. Perhaps many chapters of our story still lie hidden beneath forgotten hills across the world, waiting patiently, just as Gobekli Tepe once did, long before pyramids, long before Stonehenge, long before the first cities. A circle of towering stones already stood beneath the Anatolian sky. We know who discovered it, we know when it was built, but why it existed may remain one of humanity's greatest unanswered questions.